Hello, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. A helicopter crashed, claiming the life of an Alberta pilot who was helping to battle the wildfires in the northern part of the province. Canada's Environment Minister offered an update as to the number of wildfires still burning in Canada, many of which are out of control. And a $250,000 donation was made to help renovate a unique theatre in the Crow's Nest Pass. BCN's Micah Quinn will have that story.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Transportation Safety Board says a 41-year-old man from Whitecourt, Alberta, died after his helicopter involved in firefighting efforts crashed in the northwestern part of the province. The agency says investigators are headed to the scene. The pilot is the third person to die battling wildfires in Canada so far this year. He was the lone person on board when it went down. Emergency officials say the aircraft is in a marshy area northeast of Peace River. The chopper was operated by Valhalla Helicopters, which declined to comment on the crash. Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault offered an update as to the wildfire situation across Canada. He says this wildfire season has been unprecedented.
As of today, there are 885 active wildfires burning across Canada, 600 of which are determined to be out of control, and 11 million hectares have burned so far this year, which is 10 times the national average. Canada has now surpassed its historic record for total area burned in one season. Our government has approved support across the country. The Canadian Armed Forces are fully engaged in 2 provinces where we have active requests for assistance. In addition to the support, we have also announced programs to train more firefighters, to increase the stocks of materials ready to deploy to fight fires, and have made available to provinces support on equipment. Our government has also worked through everything from Service Canada to help people who've had to be evacuated with access benefits to Indigenous Services Canada to provide support for affected communities.
At least 7 homes have been destroyed as an aggressive wildfire has been spreading just outside of Cranbrook in southeastern British Columbia. Wildfire officials say the St. Mary's River fire has grown to 850 hectares in size and is also impacting reserve land. Around 95 people have been evacuated from the region so far. BC currently has 376 active wildfires, with 23 started in the last 24 hours alone. Officials say 225 are currently burning out of control. Officials say so far this year, British Columbia has experienced 1,234 wildfires. Emergency officials here in our province say there are currently 117 active wildfires burning. Of those, 17 are currently burning out of control and 42 are being held. Alberta Wildfires says 69% were caused by lightning, 13% are classified as suspicious and are currently under investigation, while 18% were human caused. Alberta has seen 870 wildfires so far this year. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith offered an update on her government's efforts to provide relief from high fuel prices. Smith says her government made it official and will suspend the provincial fuel tax for another half a year, saving Albertans 13 cents per litre each time they fill up at the pumps.
This will ensure that you get to keep an extra $6 to $18 in your pocket every time you fill up your vehicle. Pausing the full fuel tax on gasoline and diesel for the rest of the calendar year will put hundreds of millions of dollars back into the pockets of Albertans. But lower gas prices don't just leave more money in your pockets every time you fill up, so that you and your families can save more of your hard-earned money. It also means lower cost to deliver services and supplies that Albertans need to live. Whether it's groceries, baby formula, or laundry, detergent, lower fuel costs means shipping products to stores costs less, meaning that you'll be paying less for the things your family needs at the checkout. Many of Alberta's small business owners also rely on fuel to deliver the supplies and services Albertans need to live. So extending the fuel tax holiday will reduce costs for many of our small businesses and will help to support job creators amidst an increasingly challenging global economy.
Alberta's new Minister of Affordability and Utilities, Nathan Neudorf, who received his mandate letter from Premier Smith, says his government continues to try and help Albertans who are dealing with a very high cost of living. Outside of the provincial fuel tax being suspended till the end of the year, Neudorf says help when it comes to utilities may also be on the way.
We're very closely looking at the entire utility system, particularly electricity and natural gas. A lot of people who have been on the regulated rate option have seen their prices and their bills go up significantly this summer again. And we're being asked, hey, why and what are you going to do? And we're looking at the real root issues of this, which is solid baseload supply of energy that will help mitigate the volatility of renewables or other sources that come on and go off quite literally with the weather. And making sure that if we have a good supply of that baseload demand and it meets the demand of a growing province, we can really do a lot to soften out that bill that they get every month.
The Alberta NDP says the annual report from the Ministry of Seniors, Community and Social Services shows that the UCP is not building enough affordable housing units compared to last year. From 2021 to 2022, the government invested in building 912 units, and this year, the number has slipped to 415. In a media release, NDP leader Rachel Notley says over the last 4 years, the UCP have cut rental supplements and affordable housing, built less, and Daniel Smith's budget offered very little in the form of relief. We cannot have policies that lead to more housing insecurity and growing inequality. Meanwhile, the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services, Jason Nixon, says under an NDP government, they saw the waitlist for affordable units go up by 76%, adding the UCP are focused on making great change in that area, including having the access to affordable housing be increased by 40%.
We're investing over $1 billion over the next 3 years in affordable housing, as well as over almost $250 million in rent supplements. That is where our focus is going to be, is actually getting units built and being able to attack the affordable housing situation in our province. I will say further to that, also in partnership with my colleague, Minister Neudorf, the MLA for this area, we are going to continue to execute our affordability plan, dealing with the cost of living crisis that we see across this country and the inflation crisis, with the largest investment in affordability of any province inside the country, I think over $2 billion.
Minister Nixon responded to NDP leader Rachel Notley's comment about implementing rent control, saying it would be catastrophic. He says they will not be going down that road. A new report has found that rent is unaffordable for minimum wage workers across Canada. That's according to the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives and its new study called Rental Wages in Canada 2022. Now, here in Lethbridge, a one-bedroom rental wage was $19.62 an hour in 2022, or $21.75 for two bedrooms. Trevor Lewington, the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, says he's not surprised by these numbers.
It's key to remember that affordability of housing and rentals in Lethbridge relative to the rest of the country is still very good, right? So although this report says housing is unaffordable here relative to the minimum wage, you know, the vast majority of people here don't earn the minimum wage. So there's no question it does negatively impact some folks, but it's not the majority of people in the city. So I think that's the good news. The other thing here in Southern Alberta, we also have just over 6,000 job vacancies. And when I look across those job vacancies, the average hourly wage there is north of $22 an hour.
Now, the report also says that in 34 out of 37 census metropolitan areas across the country, the minimum wage is lower than the rental wage for a one-bedroom unit. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has directed cabinet ministers and senior officials to pursue all available options to end the ongoing labor dispute at the BC ports. After a 13-day strike earlier this month halted billions of dollars worth of goods in the ports, the union representing port workers rejected a tentative 4-year deal by a federal mediator.
I think we were all dismayed, to be honest, when we found out that a good deal that had been worked out at the table, that was agreed to both by union leadership and by the management, had been suddenly rejected, and they were back in a strike position. This was unacceptable.
The union has said it would strike again as of Saturday, but that notice has since been rescinded, leaving employers seeking clarity on what that means for future action. Well, it was sunny and hot again today in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, it looks like the mercury will be climbing as we make our way to the weekend. Are we getting close to maybe breaking any heat records?
Yeah, well, you know what, Hal? I'm actually keeping my eye on Monday, July 24th, because our expected high that day is 35 degrees. Now, the record for that day was 34.3 set back in 2007. So we're going to be very close on Monday to breaking that record if we actually hit that 35-degree mark. So I'm keeping my eye on Monday. As for Friday, though, tomorrow, we're looking at an expected high of 34 degrees. Not quite a record. The record breaker for that day was 36 degrees. That was set back in 1945. So we'll be close, though. Now, I will be back later in the show to give you the full 7-day forecast as well as the national forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Green Acres Foundation celebrated the 50th anniversary of one of their lodges this afternoon. Blue Sky Lodge opened back in 1973 in Lethbridge with 50 suites available for residents. Now, over the years, the facility has been able to expand and now houses up to 67 residents here in our city.
You know, it's kind of surprising when you look at the building and you think that thing is 50 years old, because it doesn't look 50 years old. It's very well maintained, and again, it's a home. It's not an institution, it is someone's home. So that to me, it's going to be here in another 50 years. I'm sure it will be. Different people, but it'll still have the same vibrancy and the same feel and the same fun for the residents.
Seniors have built our community. They've built our community, and as we come to an event like this, I can't be more happy with you know, how exciting it is to be here. We have an event that we do on a regular basis every couple of weeks. It's Coffee with a Counselor, and we come to the different Green Acres facilities throughout the community and ask them what some of their concerns are. A lot of them are very similar. And, you know, if it's busing and assess a ride, etc. But to sit down and just hear from those that built our community is really heartwarming.
Green Acres Foundation has 20 different locations across southern Alberta. A man who's very familiar to country music fans will be the parade marshal at this year's Whoop Up Days parade in Lethbridge. Corb Lund will be leading the charge on August the 22nd. The theme for this year's festivities will be celebrating southern Alberta, Canada's agriculture destination, which the Lethbridge and District exhibition says aligns nicely with Lund's music. During his country music career, the Alberta star has won a Juno and multiple CCMA awards. In a news release, Lund says it's an honor to lead the Whoop Up Days parade in Lethbridge, especially given the theme of this year's event is celebrating southern Alberta. The Roxy Theatre in Coleman, Alberta has been out of commission since 2003. A group calling themselves Crow's Nest Can Do is doing their part to raise the funds necessary to help rebuild the theatre. Staff with the group told us work in the theatre will begin next month following a $250,000 donation from Vancouver-based mining company Teck. BCN's Micah Quinn has more now on the long and storied history of the Roxy Theatre in the Crow's Nest Pass.
To date, we've raised approximately $1 million. About $1 million, and still need about 1.7 more to complete it.
Back in 2021, members of the Crow's Nest Can Do organization purchased the Roxy Theatre with the goal of returning it to its former glory.
Starting in about mid-August, the exterior of the building and the foundation work will be commenced, as well as the roof, and that'll be the beginning of phase one.
The building was originally constructed in 1948 and has a rich history connected to it.
It's a Quonset hut in the back, and that's what makes it the acoustics.
To it. Yeah.
And that Quonset hut, you know, it's an old World War II surplus. It was actually used in creation of the Alaska Highway. So, you know, there's a good history behind it. So great storytelling.
It's one of three only left in Western Canada, yeah, where the other two are operating and this one is not operating. So yeah, soon to be. Hopefully.
There's one in Wainwright and one in Victoria.
Staff with the group told us the support to get the Roxy Theatre back up and running has been nothing short of amazing.
And there's a lot of local talent here, lots, and they can't wait for this place to open. I've already had to turn business away that they're already asking to use the Roxy, and I have to tell them that I'm sorry. Still might be a few years before we're open, but that's a good sign that they're already asking to use the building.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
So much history at the Roxy Theatre. You know, so many of us love camping and heading out to the backcountry in both Alberta and British Columbia, and lots of us enjoy riding ATVs as well during our holidays or when out hunting or fishing. Gary Clark is with the group the Quad Squad out of the Crow's Nest Pass, and he says his group helps to save taxpayers money as they take care of grooming so many trails and keeping them in pretty good shape.
Saving the money, or saving the government thousands of dollars a year, because we do it from our own fundraising and stuff like that. So, for example, last year we estimated in kind it saved the government about $66,000. So it's considerable, and we love doing it. It's we have a great crew to work with, and everybody has fun. And again, I think that's part of you're talking about the fuel to join the club. That's part of it as well.
Mr. Clark will have more on trail stewardship in a chat with BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. A recent poll says 55% of Canadians feel the federal government is spending way too much of our money. The study by MEI Ipsos between June 29th and July 3rd surveyed 1,020 Canadians aged 18 and older, and it also found that 67% believe that they pay too much in income tax. Less than 25% of Canadians believe Ottawa is spending taxpayer dollars on the right priorities, and 67% recognize that increased government spending is contributing to inflation. The poll also discovered that 60% of Canadians are dissatisfied with the accountability and transparency of the federal government spending. It also found that Atlantic provinces were the most against the government's carbon tax, or 68% of respondents. Government public policy can impact our lives in a wide variety of ways. It can also impact major industries in Canada, including our energy sector. David Lees is with the Frontier Centre for Public Policy and explains how Ottawa's just transition will impact so many who work in the oil and gas sector.
We need affordable energy in our country. That's been historically a great strength in terms of our economy. And to call this a just transition all about, quote, the environmental climate change is really an overstatement. We think that over 80 years, the debate is about 1 degree over 80 years. And so we think that that's really an overreaction to what's going on. We've always had climate change, and what we have now is really we would say a kind of an effort to really shut down all fossil fuels, really under the false moniker of a crisis, when in fact it is not.
Catch the full interview with David Lees from Frontier Centre for Public Policy and myself coming up after Business News. A former town councillor has thrown his hat in the ring, hoping to become the new mayor of Claresholm. Brad Schlossberger recently put in his resignation, and Town Council has passed a motion for September 18th to be the official by-election day for both mayor and councillor. The former mayor of Claresholm, Chelsea Petrovic, resigned after winning a landslide victory for the UCP in the riding of Livingston-McLeod. As many Canadians have been dealing with wildfires and wildfire smoke, homeowners in Highland Falls, New York have had to deal with massive flooding that has swept through their community. Samaritan's Purse volunteers were there helping out with the cleanup efforts.
There was water running on this main road, like swimming pools, and rocks were coming down. Water that rose so fast and took over everything. You just watch your house get swept away. It is just a surreal moment. You just don't know what to feel at that time.
Today in Highland Falls, we're working on 2 different houses that had mud and debris that came from runoff. So we're doing debris removal, mudding out.
This right here? Oh, it's leaking from there.
It's amazing to be able to help people in the community who've had such a great loss, be able to share some of Jesus' love with them while we help them clean up their property. Whatever it takes to get their home back in order.
Every time we have an interaction with our homeowners, we have an opportunity to share with them the love of Christ.
Christ within the storm. To do this work in Jesus' name, I'm so grateful I can do it, and to do it with other believers and my church members, it is the greatest honor.
Samaritan's Purse are phenomenal people, willing to do whatever we need to help. It just goes a long way. God bless that you have people that way and an organization that way that can help people like me or people in this town. I'm grateful for all the help that Samaritan Purse is bringing and blessed. In a time where, you know, it's like you got to deal with insurance companies and everything else, to have something steady there is what really is Samaritan's Purse is about, is to take away some of that stress when you're going through this situation. We can't thank you enough for what you did to our house and our home. Although we have a lot of uncertainty going forward, we know the Lord and that He will have some plan for us going forward, and that this is just one step towards it.
Great to see the impact of Christian organizations around the world. We may be close to breaking a heat record here in southwestern Alberta as we get closer and closer to the weekend. The mercury is going up. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. You know, the average high for this time of year is around 26 degrees or so. Things are going to be a lot hotter than that as we make our way to the weekend here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, when it got to be this hot, my parents used to put out the sprinkler so I could run through it to maybe cool things off a little bit. I might have to try that approach again.
Oh, I agree. I loved doing that as a kid as well. And you know what? This week it's going to be the perfect sprinkler running weather because look at these temperatures. We're up into the mid-30s here. And as I was saying before, almost a record breaker. Could see one on Monday with the high of 35 there because the record was actually 34.3. That was back in 2007. So maybe we will break a record. As for the rest of these days, highs of 34 Friday, 35 on Saturday. We'd have to be close to 36 or 37 to break those records. 31 expected on Sunday, up to 35 Monday. And then Tuesday, that's where we're going to be seeing it down into the high 20s, 28 for both of those days with a mix of sun and cloud. But we're still above the average high for this time of year. Average high is actually 26 degrees. Average low, 11 degrees. That's more like our overnights. Our overnights are even going to be a little warmer than that this week. 35 was our high temperature on this day. That happened back in 2003. And only 3 degrees back in 1977. 5:46, that's when the sun rose this morning. Our sunset this evening at 9:29 p.m. We're looking at 15 hours, 43 minutes of daylight. So we're definitely going the other way now. Mainly sunny conditions on the west coast. 22 for a high in Victoria. A little bit cooler in the Juan de Fuca Strait with a 40k wind. 24 in Vancouver. 29 inland. Clear skies. Clear skies also expected in Edmonton tomorrow with a high of 28. 29 in Calgary. Calgary seeing a sunny morning with a 40% chance of showers and clouds developing in the afternoon. Could see a risk of a thunderstorm as well. As we get into the rest of the prairies, Regina looking at mainly sunny skies tomorrow. High of 27. Should be a lovely day. 28 for a high in Regina. Seeing hazy conditions, sunshine and increasing cloud in the afternoon. And 27 for a high in Winnipeg. And they can expect a mix of sun and cloud there in Winnipeg. Okay, as we get to the central part of the country, we're seeing some rainfall. 40% chance of showers in Toronto. Looking at an afternoon thunderstorm there. 24 for a high. Here's what's happening in Ottawa and Montreal though. Tonight and into tomorrow, looking at significant rainfall. Could see 30 to 50 millimeters, exceeding 50 millimeters where there are thunderstorms. And could also be seeing some flash flooding and ponding on roads. So definitely be aware of that. High of 23 tomorrow in Ottawa and 22 for a high in Montreal. As we get into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton looking at a high of 26 degrees, partly cloudy skies. Halifax could see 5 millimeters of rain and prolonged rainfall throughout the weekend. High of 23 there. 24 for a high in Charlottetown. 30% chance of showers. St. John's, Newfoundland, 26 degrees. Prolonged hot and humid conditions are expected. They are under a heat warning. Could see a chance of showers though and some fog in some onshore winds there in St. John's tomorrow. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Canadian Chamber of Commerce says consumer spending is expected to soften after the Bank of Canada ended its pause on interest rate hikes. Economists say spending will likely slow in the second half of this year as people cut back on discretionary purchases. The Chamber found that spending saw a resurgence in April and May following a post-Christmas slump. However, the Chamber says spending began to dip in June after the central bank hiked its key policy rate to 4.75%. It's now sitting at 5%. Canadian auto parts giant Magna International says it will invest close to $800 million US to build parts plants in the United States to support Ford's electric pickup truck production. The Ontario company says it will build 2 facilities in Stanton, Tennessee, as part of the supplier park for Ford's Blue Oval City, which will be capable of building 500,000 electric trucks per year. The plant will supply Ford with battery enclosures, truck frames, and vehicle seats. Magna will also be building a stamping and assembly facility in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee. Tesla is recalling around 16,000 of its 2021 to 2023 Model S and Model X vehicles because of a seatbelt issue. The company says some front row belts may not have been reconnected after being repaired. Tesla says if the seatbelt is not reconnected properly, it may not do its job in the event of a collision. As of June 19th, the company has identified 12 warranty claims related to the issue, but says it is not aware of any crashes, injuries, or deaths as a result of it. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 54 points on the day to finish at 20,436. The Dow was up 163 points to 35,225. The S&P 500 was down 30 on the day to 4534, and the Nasdaq was down 294 points to 14,063. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 28 cents to 75.63 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 14 cents to 2.74 US. Gold was up 9 cents to 19.6962 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 24.76 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.70 per bushel, barley's at $9.47, canola's at $19.10, and corn is at $10.59 per bushel. Live cattle were down $1 to $180.33. Feeder cattle were down $1.70 to $245.10, and lean hogs were up $2.70 to $100.63. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 75.91 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the Transportation Safety Board says a 41-year-old man from Whitecourt, Alberta, died after his helicopter involved in firefighting efforts crashed in the northwestern part of the province. The pilot is the third person to die battling wildfires in Canada so far this year. He was the lone person on board when it went down. Emergency officials say the aircraft crashed in a marshy area northeast of Peace River. Public policy impacts our lives in a wide variety of ways. Coming up, we'll chat with David Lees from the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, who'll discuss how the federal government's just transition policies will impact so many in our energy sector. If you see news happening in your community, please be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You know, politics are nothing without policy and the exchange of ideas. Many would agree that politics should be a two-way street of communication where there's a meeting of the minds. But too often, however, the ideas that bring the spark to the conversation are overshadowed by the power and the ambition of personal careers and gains and campaigns. Joining us to talk about the benefits of good public policy is David Lees of the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. He joins us from Abbotsford, British Columbia. David is also the host of Leaders on the Frontier, which is part of Return to Reason, airing on Miracle Channel. David, welcome to Bridge City News.
Great to be here, Hal.
David, let's begin with this question. Can you explain why Canadians should really care about public policy?
Well, I think it makes everything in terms of our lives. It's choices about the small things to the big things. So in many ways, it determines what kind of lives we're going to lead. Is it one of hope and prosperity, or is it one of, well, frankly, bad things? I mean, we have a lot of choices that we need to make in our country today.
So how does the Frontier Centre for Public Policy get involved in Canada's political landscape, whether it's provincially or federally?
We try to examine issues based on facts and evidence. We have a bias, and that is towards a free and democratic society. We believe in the age-old traditions of respect for individual rights and freedoms. And we try to be very discerning in terms of certain principles that empower individuals. So we will look at issues from healthcare to transportation, taxation, economic performance, and we say, look, how does that help the individual and communities go forward in a successful way?
So what are your thoughts on the carbon taxes, which are impacting so many Canadians, including our farmers right now across Canada?
Well, we think that policy, as an example, is really bad. It disempowers individuals to be able to live their lives. It doesn't do what it claims it to do in terms of protecting the environment. all those carbon taxes go back right into general revenue. So it's a bit of a farcical policy. It's really not about policy, it's about appearing to be policy.
Now, you've had a wide variety of senior leadership roles within the government, industry, education, and First Nations. What made you make the switch over to a policy think tank?
You know, I've been a supporter of the frontier for quite a long time, and I just really think we need to elevate the level of thinking. So I was approached a number of years ago about helping out more actively with Frontier, and I said yes, and it just kind of grew from there. And the center's just blossoming, and I just really feel honored to help be part of that discussion that serves Canadians.
Now, David, when you present well thought out policies to our federal government, the Trudeau government, what kind of response do you get, if any?
Well, we get a number of responses. We have people who are, for instance, elected officials and bureaucrats, and a number of us have been in those senior roles. So we know what it's like to be in office. And the response can either be one of appreciation, welcoming that there's a group of well-intended team of experts and former officials that take the time to carefully examine and look at the evidence. Because often when you're in power, you don't really have any time to look at those issues in more depth. So it takes a lot of effort. So people appreciate that.
What are your thoughts on the Trudeau government and their just transition policy, just transitioning away from the energy sector, oil and gas, more into green technology? What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, if you look at the just transition policy, it's really a just transition, we would say, to nowhere. We would say it's actually not policy based on reality, unfortunately, in the sense that what we're looking at is a transition that is really all about shutting down the oil and gas industry. And we think this will have enormously negative impacts on people, the industry. This is going to negatively impact families big time. So we think it's a disaster. We need affordable energy in our country. That's been historically a great strength in terms of our economy. And to call this a just transition all about, quote, the environmental climate change is really an overstatement. We think that over 80 years, the debate is about 1 degree over 80 years. And so we think that that's really an overreaction to what's going on. We've always had climate change, and what we have now is really we would say a kind of an effort to really shut down all fossil fuels, really under the false moniker of a crisis, when in fact it is not.
So how do you think Alberta can really fight back? I know Premier Daniel Smith has talked about the Alberta Sovereignty Act in the past to protect oil and gas workers here across the province. It's a big industry, right? And it also helps support the equalization payments, which make the way to central and eastern Canada. Do you think maybe that Daniel Smith would eventually invoke that Sovereignty Act?
I think that there's elements of it that need to be invoked in the sense that this is an existential threat to, I would argue, not just simply Alberta's economy, but Canada. And it begs the question, how does Alberta, let alone other provinces, work together to rebalance our federal system? Our federal system never envisioned the federal government basically trying to take over everything. Our partners in our federation are the provinces and the federal government, and they need to work together. But the federal government is now intruding systematically in every provincial area. So we would say that that balance is out of whack, and it needs to be confronted now before it's too late.
So David, how would you say that a policy institute like the one you're with right now meets the true needs of Canadians?
Well, I mean, if you believe that individual rights and freedoms, if economic freedom and the traditions that have served our country so well, and not just Canada, but more in the Anglo-Saxon tradition going back in the UK some 1,000 years, then that's what we're trying to serve Canadians about, trying to empower them to make the decisions about how they're going to live their lives as they see fit, and not frankly be run by the authority of the state. And I think that's what we need to do, is realize that today a lot of actors are really special interests that are all about guiding you to serve their interests and not yours.
Now, we've chatted a bit about public policy in your role at the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, David, but you're also the host of Leaders on the Frontier. Can you talk about the role your program really provides for Canadians?
Well, we really want to bring in some of the extraordinary thinkers and people involved in all aspects of Canadian life and certainly around the world who talk about these different areas of public policy and bring them alive. So we look at the pros and cons of issues and try to bring really a new light and understanding that a lot of people never hear about. If you listen to a lot of the mainstream media, unfortunately, you won't hear about issues and how they're really impacting your life and what's really going on in terms of these debates. So I'm excited to be very much involved in that program, to host it. I think it's a great legacy in terms of the Return to Reason initiative that Leon Fontaine started, and so it's just an honor to be part of that.
You know, David, there's been so much political competition for ideas going after the hearts and minds of Canadians, especially here in Alberta. What do you think really needs to be done to see a bit of a policy shakeup in our country?
You know, there's so many levels. We need better information. There's a lot of work to try to censor or manipulate information, and information is critical to any democracy. And I would say that one of the things that we need to do is get more citizens involved in the democratic process. A lot of elites who run our country are very happy if people are passive and kind of lethargic and on the sidelines. We need to promote better informed citizens that are active in every aspect of our democracy.
A couple of months ago, I had the honor and the opportunity to interview CPC leader Pierre Poilievre. He says Canada is broken, and he listed a whole laundry list of reasons why he thought our country is broken. Now, many people think that our finances are in disarray, and especially with the budgets right now. What are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, there are many major challenges that Canada faces, and Canada is an incredible country. We have historically been one of the most prosperous, free, and tolerant and kind nations on the planet. But our country's changing, and I think it's changing for the worst, in the sense that we have a lot of efforts that are undermining our freedoms. I think we are also declining in terms of our economic performance. We're losing business investment. So there's a whole series of indicators that we could systematically look at that would say that Canada is on a decline. And there's reasons for that. And I would say first and foremost are the fact that we've been implementing some pretty disastrous policies. I think you mentioned the so-called just transition. There's been many actions that the federal government's taken before that are part of that trend. So it's incumbent on Canadians to wake up and understand what's going on for the sake of our country, but for the sake of the next generation.
Now, this last provincial election we had in Alberta, there was a lot of talk of Alberta separating, being its own sovereign nation, going its own way. Then there were other parties as well. Political leaders were talking about, why don't we just join forces with the rest of Western Canada and separate as well? What are your thoughts on those who want to see the West being best and leaving Canada altogether?
Well, I would hope that it wouldn't come to that. I think it's a very difficult path to map out credibly. In this day and age, it's in our benefit to work together as a federation. I think the original vision that was struck by the founders of our country, including Sir John A. Macdonald, was a brilliant one. But I would say that the balance in our federation is not balanced between the federal and provincial governments. And it's incumbent on the provinces, including Alberta, definitely Saskatchewan, and hopefully British Columbia and Manitoba, to work together. It's that kind of teamwork that will empower that kind of movement to empower the provincial side of the governments.
So speaking of teamwork, David, how can we improve and maybe smooth over the rough waters with Ottawa and the Trudeau government?
I think that actions speak louder than words, and I think that action after action has shown in the past that this government is not necessarily willing to work with provincial levels of government. And I think what you need to do is, again, work together as a provincial team, with the federal government. I think that you need to look at a full court press in terms of using all the tools, whether it's legal, persuasion with citizens, to realize that this is not going well. We're on a path that will really change and undermine not only our freedoms, but our standard of living. And so people need to wake up to that reality.
Are there certain policies that you're looking at as well with the Frontier Centre for Public Policy to be in more support of our farming communities, our agricultural communities, which are the bread and butter of our economy here?
Absolutely. There's a couple ones. One is the fact that we're very concerned about these so-called net zero policies, this just transition, as you talked about, because all of that is not going to just simply impact negatively our oil and gas industry. It's a domino effect, Hal, that will cascade right across every industry, whether it's plastics, manufacturing, forestry, mining, and guess what? Agriculture as well. So when they talk about redefining how people are going to farm, and the federal government inserting itself in the lives of farmers and telling them how to farm in terms of all kinds of issues, these will be disastrous.
David, how can people find out more information about the Frontier Centre for Public Policy and your program, Leaders of the Frontier?
Well, I would encourage them to look at our website, sign up for our newsletter, and look at all those kinds of resources. And I would also encourage them to sign up for the Return to Reason newsletter, which is part of that wonderful family of programs, including Leaders on the Frontier.
On Miracle Channel. David Leese is with the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, joining us from Abbotsford, British Columbia. Thanks so much for your time today, David.
Thank you, Hal.
Well, the outdoor activities here in southern Alberta are part of the reason this area is a great place to live and also play in. And we've been chatting about the activities in the Crow's Nest Pass in recent weeks, and that's of course the mountainous region in southwestern Alberta on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains. It's famous for outdoor recreation, and we did not want to forget about the motorized sports and opportunities that the region also has to offer. So to talk about what fuels their passion for exploring the public land use zones on 2 and 4 wheels, we're joined by Gary Clark of the Crow's Nest Quad Squad. Gary, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, so maybe give us a bit about, tell us a little bit about the origins of the Crow's Nest Pass Quad Squad. I got to make sure I say that right. It's kind of a tongue twister. So what's its mission or purpose? Why does it exist?
The Quad Squad is a nonprofit organization that was formed roughly 25 years ago, incorporated 25 years ago. And our mission is really to promote safe and responsible riding in the Crow's Nest Pass on motorized vehicles. Big component of that is education on how to ride responsibly and safely, and also to respect all the laws and the environmental impacts that we have on the environment. So that's basically what we do. We do a lot of trail maintenance. We have purchased some heavy-duty equipment to be able to go into the trails and smooth the trails out, take away of the erosion factors, and to build what's called swales, which are basically a hump in the trail to divert the water off the trail safely into the forest floor and not go into the creeks. We also do a large number of bridge building and also bridge placement. We have, over the years of the history of the club, we've had over 70 bridges that we've placed over waterways.
Wow.
Last year, for example, we did a number of projects that we also put in a couple of bridges, and also we were commissioned by the provincial government to divert a new trail around some really badly eroded areas and let nature take its course. There's 2 particular trails that we did, both about almost 3/4 of kilometer long. So that's the type of work that we do.
That's so interesting. So but yeah, you're conservationists as well as recreationalists. And I think a lot of people might not realize that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, of course, also about safety and responsibility. And we're definitely going to get into that as well. I think most people would think that this group is mostly about fuel and friendship, that's basically what powers the factors for you. But what do you think is the motivating factor for your members to join?
Well, there's a lot. There's the camaraderie. There's the, like you say, the friendship. A lot of people that join the club are fairly new riders and maybe new to the area and really want to be taken on even like a guided ride type thing to know where they can go and learn the rules and stuff like that. So we have two major events. We call them a season opener in the spring and a season closure in the fall. And it's a camp out type thing. And we have poker runs and prizes and stuff like that.
Sounds like fun.
Usually we get about 100 participants each time. So, and then we also do 5-day rides during the year.
Wow.
And usually we get about 40 people come out to some of the rides. So.
That's a long time to get out there and ride, 5 days. That's amazing. So do you personally have a favorite area or trail to ride?
Well, they're all favorites, I guess. But I think the Willoughby Trail in the Castle Parks has got to be one of my more favorite trails. And then also the Spoon Valley Run, which goes around leaving from the Gilroy staging area and then going around Crow's Nest Mountain down in a nice flat area, and then back down on the Atlas pipeline trail system, and then cutting across back to McGillivray.
Yeah, fantastic. It's such a beautiful area. And of course, you are joining us there from that little slice of heaven, Coleman, right, which is right there in the Crow's Nest Pass. You're right in the heart of it. Okay, so Gary, in recent years, I know quadding in the Rockies and in the wilderness has gotten some bad press, and some people are against it, saying that it disrupts the migratory patterns of animals, or that it's maybe bad for the environment, or wrecks grasses, trees, bushes, what have you, right? And at one point, I think it was even banned temporarily. So what would your response be to all of that?
Well, that's one of the biggest challenges that we had. Certainly at one point, I think we had close to about 2,500 kilometers of trails. And through the designated trail system, that has now been reduced to roughly about 600 kilometers. So there's a big disruption in the trail system. Most of the trails we have now have bridges over most of the waters. We're still striving to be 100%, but it's going to take a long time. So that was one of our biggest challenges to overcome. Unfortunately, when you reduce the amount of trails and more people are going on the trails, so that's adding more traffic and possibly more damage. So that was one of the reasons that we made a decision to purchase some heavy-duty equipment to go out and fix the trails. So we have a very aggressive season to doing that. It's saving the money, or saving the government thousands of dollars a year, because we do it from our own fundraising and stuff like that. So, for example, last year we estimated in kind it saved the government about $66,000. So it's considerable, and we love doing it. It's we have a great crew to work with, and everybody has fun. And again, I think that's part of you're talking about the fuel to join the club. That's part of it as well. We have over 3,000 hours in volunteer hours throughout the year, and everybody has a lot of fun, not only working, but also going on the rides as well.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. On the flip side of all that bad press, you guys are doing those conservation efforts. You guys are involved in a lot of stuff there. It's really interesting. So are there any other challenges or obstacles that you've encountered while operating as a group?
Well, I think obviously the financial aspect of it. Everybody is struggling to raise money, and there were funds that were available which dried up. Fortunately, the Conservative government, along with the NDP, had started this as well in getting what's called a Trail Act in place, so that part of the registration from the monies that goes to the registration of the machines itself is now being divided up into a pot administered by the Alberta Off-Highway Vehicle Association. And from that, then we are able to draw funds from that to complete our project. So that's been a huge help to us, that we can concentrate more on maintaining the trails and getting bridges over waters and stuff like that, instead of having to do a lot of fundraising and in place of it. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so interesting. Are there any special requirements someone might need to operate one of these vehicles? You don't need any special license or certificate or anything like that, right?
No, you don't. It does have to be registered and insured, which is one of our club policies.
Okay.
You do have to wear helmets on a quad. Provincially, the law says that if you're in a side-by-side with a seatbelt on, then you do not need a helmet. But on any of the quad squad rides, that is mandatory, that you have to wear a helmet, even in a side-by-side. So safety first.
Yeah, speaking of safety, I know every so often you hear about accidents or incidents involving an off-road vehicle. I know growing up, we had three-wheel ATVs out at our cabin, and almost every one of us kids had some sort of accident with it. Thankfully, nothing more than just broken bones. But I believe those three-wheelers are now banned. But do you ensure your members practice any other type of safety measures other than helmets? Like, how does the group prioritize safety and responsibility for quad riding?
Well, again, with the helmet use, and you're right, three-wheelers have been banned, and there was a reason for it, and I rode them and know why they're banned. But they mostly when we go in a group, then we have a meeting beforehand. We have to be very conscious that we're in a wildlife corridor. The bears are out. We do carry bear bangers, and we do have emergency satellite equipment with us for any type of emergency. We also carry radios that we can communicate back and forth between ourselves, and then also, if required, we can also reach the search and rescue channels and the other government channels. So we want to tell people to ride slowly. It's not a race. You're out there to enjoy the backcountry, and also to respect people when we come upon hikers, to slow down. You don't need to be roaring by them, and slow down. And same as the mountain bike people and the equestrians. So it's that backcountry is for everybody. It's not just for us, it's for everybody. So
yeah, I haven't gone in the backcountry, but I would imagine it's a beautiful way to see the mountains and the countryside.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you go right up Willoughby Ridge, for example, and that's probably why I like it the best, is because you're actually on top of a ridge. So on your right, you see a downhill view. On your left, you see a downhill view.
Oh, wow. That's
it's
incredible.
Absolutely beautiful.
No kidding. Okay, so in your mind, how has the Crow's Nest Pass Quad Squad positively impacted the local community?
Well, there was a study done in 2014 by a lady from the University of Alberta that did a study as part of her master's degree, and she estimated that through online surveys and also interviews of over 600 people, that the annual income to the Crow's Nest Pass was $7.1 million spent on anything from food, fuel, travel, etc. And $4.4 million of that was actually spent locally in the Crow's Nest Pass. So that's considerable amount of money. We also have an annual budget of roughly about $100,000 that all of that money is spent either locally, or if we can't get it locally here, then certainly in Lethbridge has helped us out as far as equipment and stuff like that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also I think the volunteerism that we do, from anything from fundraising for like doing bartending for weddings, or the curling club, our annual raffle off quad or side by side actually brings in an awful lot of money for us for our purposes, and just the volunteering of getting out, like Stewardship Day, the first weekend in June, doing projects to clean up areas, or also to do the maintenance on trails itself, I think is a very positive aspect for the Crow's Nest Pass, and it keeps people coming back as well.
That's so interesting. It sounds like you're involved in all kinds of activities and events. And what are maybe the future goals or plans that the group is currently working towards?
We're going to carry on as we do now. We work very closely with the provincial government, in particular the local forestry office and the higher ups in environment and parks as well. They've been a very solid base for us. We rely on them on advice on how to do a certain trail or maintain the trails. They come out and make sure that we're doing it correctly and how they want it done and stuff. So we have a really good relationship to it. We're very lucky down here that we do. And so we're going to continue going on with building more bridges and putting more bridges in place where it's required. We understand the science behind how the going through waters impacts the fish habitat and things like that. So
yeah, I was going to ask you actually why build a bridge? I know these things can cut right through the water, depending how deep it is.
Yeah, and it's fun to go through the water, but that's part of the thing. It's actually illegal to go through the water.
Okay.
So that's why we build the bridges, and it basically, if when you're going through the water, you're stirring up the silt, which causes the deeper pools to fill up, and the water slows down. The fish can't have a great habitat to live in, covers up the food. There's all kinds of reasons, but
makes sense once you start thinking about it. It definitely makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe we're almost out of time here, but really quickly, what advice would you give to individuals or families who might be interested in ATV quad riding?
I would definitely join a club such as ours. There are other clubs around the province as well if you're not from this area, but certainly you can look us up on our website at quadsquad.ca and also our Facebook page as well. The benefits of joining the club are that you get some reductions from certain businesses in town as well. And also you get the emails and their messages on safety and upcoming events and stuff like that.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I was going to ask, is there a benefit to joining a club like this other than just going out on your own?
well, I think there is. We always urge people to at least go with another couple or so, because if you do break down way out in the middle of the trail, it's a long walk back, and
yes. Could be dangerous.
Yeah, so that's the other advantage of going on our rides, of course. If someone breaks down or is having trouble or is afraid to go over a certain area, then you have all kinds of help there to help.
You need
people.
that buddy system, I guess. It can be dangerous out there in the wilderness, that's for sure. All right. Well, Gary Clark of the Crow's Nest Quad Squad, thanks so much for joining us today from Coleman, Alberta. A little slice of heaven there in the Crow's Nest Pass.
Absolutely. Come on out. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.